Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Woodburn Accountants and Advisors China webinar series on Build Your Strategy in China. You've joined us for part 4 of this webinar series, part 4 and day 4 on how to execute your China strategy. Now, if you joined for all the sessions this week, then you will know that Ellie's sessions on Monday and Tuesday, they were pre-recorded. She's got 3 very young children at home, and she was very worried that she wouldn't get any privacy. So we pre-recorded those sessions. I'm winging it. I'm going live. Yesterday, I was given my own privacy by my kids. Today, I'm not being given that privacy. They're in the same room as me, so please do bear with me. They're 3 and 5, and they just want mommy around. So if you do hear anything in the background, it is them. So we're going to start off with today's presentation. As these webinars are recorded, they're posted on our YouTube channel. I do always have to go through the same spiel. I apologize for that, but let's go ahead and get started. The pace of change in China is accelerating. Unprecedented geopolitics, exponential technologies, shifting demographics, and new social norms are reshaping the business environment. Organizations, whether B2B or B2C, they need to be responsive and agile if they are to survive and thrive in this new normal. And let's face it, we are absolutely in a new normal today. But in times of great change, it can be tempting to slip into a reactive frame of mind, fighting fires and rolling with what you know. Many businesses, both large and small, fall into this pattern in China, overlooking vast societal, cultural, technological, and political differences. But you don't have to. Woodburn Accountants and Advisors is offering this series on Build Your Strategy in China free of charge. And together with Ellie Adams from Kiva Global, we will provide you with information and tools to enrich your China business skills and enhance your market entry efforts into China. As mentioned, you've joined us for part 4 of this webinar series on how to execute your China strategy. So let's get started. Ellie won't be joining us today. She's got 3 kids at home. She's got absolutely no privacy. So I'm still adding her slides here. She works for Kiva Global. There's a little bit background here on Ellie and her contact information as well. As mentioned, she did 2 presentations, both Monday and Tuesday. They are already up on our YouTube channel. So if you want to review them, you have the ability to do so. I always start off my webinar presentations to highlight who these webinars are for, and I categorize people and companies into 3 groups. The first are the newbies in China. Now, the newbies in China are generally those that have either found an opportunity, received an inquiry, or believe there's an opportunity in China, and they're looking to gain education, they're fishing for information, and they're trying to understand how they can develop their business in China, formulate strategies, organize business plans, and hopefully also then budgets. The next category are the startups in China. The startups in China are usually those companies that have been there for 1 to 3, sometimes I even say 1 to 5 years, because usually that's on average the period it takes for a company to break even. But these are the companies where they are so focused on their core business. So if you're distributing in China, for example, they're so focused on acquiring new clients, maintaining relationships with clients, and the idea is just sell, 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 and then manage the immediate supply chain that is associated with that. But probably there's absolutely no focus on the roadmap, which I went through yesterday, which means they're not focusing on certain things that they have to protect. They're not focusing on operational guidelines. Potentially their whole administrative functions are, not secure. And they're at a stage now where they do have to focus on these things in order to be able to grow. I also have the experienced China hands, and if you were on yesterday's presentation, I highlighted, there were quite a few of you that were on. It's always surprising for people to realize that I do get experienced China hands on here, but these are people who, like myself, have been in China for 10, 15, 20 years, And because there are consistent updates in regulations, in laws, in ways of doing things, I have a lot of experienced China hands that pop on just to learn, to educate, to continue their education, to be able to improve their companies, improve their relationships, et cetera, and to be able to then focus on growth. So I really want people to interact with me. So this is the first interaction. If you didn't interact with me yesterday, I want you to interact with me. Tell me who you are, all right? Are you a newbie? Are you a startup? Are you an experienced China hands? For those of you that messaged me already yesterday and have been messaging over the previous, you don't have to repeat yourselves. But for those who haven't, please let me know. It'd be great to understand where you are and who you are. And just give me a background. So Victoria, thank you for letting me know you're a startup. Anybody else? Please do let me know and interact. How these webinars work with me is that I teach, I educate. That's the whole point of these webinars, is to give you guys plenty of information at your fingertips to know what next steps you should take. I'll be asking a couple of questions, again, to know who you are and have a better understanding of what you're doing. This will be 60 to 90 minutes of your time. Use it wisely. So ask your questions, ask your comments. This is all free of charge. Like I said, I have a backlog of people to answer to. So does Ellie. Please bear with us. We will be answering all of your questions and your emails that have also been coming in this week. But just be patient with us. We're struggling at the moment with the home working situation and the kids. So a little bit about myself. Now I'm not going to use it today because I've got my kids trundling around behind me, but I am thinking about using in future webinars the webcam. What do you guys think about that? Some people gave me their opinions yesterday. Would you prefer it when I give these webinars to use the camera? Do you want to see a person? If not, are you happy just seeing my face like this? This is just to give you an idea of what I look like. To put a voice to the face, I guess, or the face to the voice. Who am I? My name is Christina Kohler-Paluccia. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I'm a leading expert on inbound investment into China. I have over 16 years of corporate services and corporate compliance experience, solely working with foreign investors that are entering the Chinese market. And I've worked with over 500 companies with their market entry strategies, their implementations, as well as their growth, which if you joined yesterday's webinar presentation, those are the 3 milestones that a company should achieve when going into China. I'm also the creator of the China Roadmap program, which leads on to a mentorship program, which again was highlighted all in yesterday's presentation. Now, as it's quite relevant at this moment in time, and as I'm probably 8 weeks ahead of most of you that are in Europe, the US, or Canada, or Australia, I've had time on my hands to write a book. And I've written a book about the 5 insights to consider for your China business during the COVID-19 outbreak. It highlights everything from what to expect after the COVID-19 virus. What are the new opportunities that are existing for foreign investors? It's going through policies. In the forward, it's a very personal reflection on how it's impacting myself, my family, my team, and my business. It is a very personalized book, easy to read. It is 50 pages. And if you do have time on your hands at the moment and you want to have a copy, email me. It's free of charge. And you can email me at christina@woodburnglobal.com to get that copy. Now, yesterday, so I really had to think very carefully on how to display the content in today's presentation, and hopefully I will give you an idea on how you can execute your strategy by giving you case studies and examples, okay? But all of this presentation reflects back on yesterday's presentation on the China roadmap. So if you join that presentation, then all of this will make sense to you. If you didn't, I'm going to do my best for it to make sense. The China roadmap is something I created that should be a guide or a roadmap for companies that are looking to enter the Chinese market implement a strategy, and then grow in that market. I am not targeting companies that are trying to necessarily incorporate in China. Anybody who just simply wants to transact with the Chinese market, whether that's from their home jurisdiction or whether that is by actually incorporating an entity in China, or utilizing third parties to stimulate that transaction. So there are basically 3 milestones that one needs to achieve, and there are 9 superpowers, and I call them superpowers because, quite frankly, if you go through all of these steps, knowledge is power, and this is how you're going to gain all of your knowledge to know what you should be doing and how to protect your business and make it safe and prosperous. So the first milestone is opportunity. It's knowing, is there an opportunity, how to evaluate that opportunity, and to do that, you need to educate yourself by joining webinars like this. You need to do your research, and you need to build a strategy like Ellie highlighted how to do, and that follows on by building a business plan and a budget. Then it's all about implementation, developing an ecosystem, a network of individuals that can help you to make sure that the business that you're developing in China is protected and that there are system processes in place. Growth, which is the third milestone, is all about analyzing the numbers. Now, if you are online today and you are not finance people, this is critical then to have someone who is in the finance profession to help you. It's to be able to read the numbers. It's to be able to analyze the numbers, interpret the numbers, so that ultimately you can make decisions and focus on what is the core aspect of your business. So how we're going to start off today's presentation is all about how to execute your strategy. And in the first part of this presentation, because that's sort of the feedback I've been getting from people this week, is how to execute your strategy without a structure in China. All right, so that'll be the first part of today's presentation. So just as an introduction, now, when most people come to me about China, their first thought is, well, we can't do anything without having something on the ground. Having something on the ground means a lot of very different things. It could mean that you just want to hire someone on the ground. It could be that you just want to travel to China every so often. It could be that you need a virtual office space. It could mean that you need a showroom. It could mean that you want to work with different partners and you need to maintain that relationship. It could mean that you want to do invoicing. There's so many aspects around the whole concept of doing something in China or having something in China. Now, most people assume that when they do their international expansion and China is one of their markets, it really is something sexy to say, I've got an office in China, right? And to be able on your website in the contact us page to put an address saying China. Now, I think one of the things that you need to be very aware of is that having an entity in China does not mean success. Having an entity in China, first of all, means big investment, a lot of resources and time that you need to focus on. If you don't have those things, an entity in China will not make sense for you. And I'm very, very honest with people, because ultimately you don't want to have an entity in China and after 6 months to 1 year, you say to your service provider or your lawyer, actually, I never needed this entity. Why did you recommend it? I want to get rid of it. It takes 2 years to liquidate an entity in China. Okay, you don't want to make that big error of saying, I want to set something up, and then after 6 months say, well, actually, I don't need it. I would then tell you to actually freeze that entity, pay a sort of management fee every so often to maintain it, but don't get liquidated, because at some point you might need it. But you've got to really make those considerations and decisions right from the get-go. Visas are also an issue, especially in China nowadays. So one thing I do want to say is don't let the visa process in China get in the way of your international expansion. It is very difficult to get visas for foreigners. You should firstly evaluate, do you need foreigners on the ground or not? If you need just one, it might be a lot easier. If you need a lot, there will be issues in terms of the quota that is being provided to you to get the visas. But don't let the visa process get in the way of your international expansion. Think about localizing and knowing what that local team would do for you. So what are ultimately the goals when you don't have an entity on the ground in China, these are probably the two goals that you might have. One is you want to hire somebody on the ground to do the work on the ground for you, but without actually investing in a structure. So I think there's two things that you need to keep in mind. One, a mainland Chinese employee that is residing in mainland China, they must pay personal income tax and social insurance in China. And ultimately, in order to be able to do that, they have to be employed by an entity that is registered in China. Freelance agreements are a very gray area in China, meaning that if there is a breach of that freelance agreement, most likely you will be at fault as the foreign entity. Don't rely on freelance agreements. Worst case scenarios that I've seen is people say, yes, we've got a freelance agreement in the form of email communication between ourselves and the employee. Email communication is not an agreement. It's email communication. There is nothing definitive about email communication. So be very, very aware of how you're hiring people in China. If you want a foreigner to be based in mainland China, well, first of all, they need a work permit and residence visa. In order to get that, they have to be employed by an entity in China. If they're traveling in and out of China, be extremely aware of the permanent establishment regulations in your home jurisdiction. All right, because that will affect you for the projects that are being delivered in China. So in order to overcome all of these dilemmas, where people need to be properly and legally employed, you should utilize a company that is registered in China to hire those individuals on your behalf. So these are PEO organizations that have the ability to act as an intermediary to hire those individuals on your behalf. There are numerous China country-related associations that offer that service. There are chambers of commerce. I'm not here to sell, but Woodburn offers that service. There are a whole bunch of corporate service providers out there that offer this service. Do it legally. You want to be able to sleep at night knowing that no staff member can use this as leverage against you in your newbie or startup phase. It will cost you money. I can tell you that right now. So what does this mean? It means that when you look at the Chinese roadmap, you want to make sure that you have your system processes in place for that. You want to know that there's a contract. You should have an employee handbook. You want to have the social insurances and taxes in place. And I want to highlight here a case study that happened with a German client of mine back in the day who used one of their suppliers as this PEO organization, as this intermediary. So the supplier, actually, by the time that I was in touch with this company, was hiring 5 employees on behalf of this German company. Now, on one visit, one business trip that the German head was doing to China, he obviously went to visit the office, to visit his team, and to also visit the supplier. And he saw one of his team members walking around the office on crutches, because it seemed like he'd broken his leg, holding an envelope, asking people for what seemed like donations. In the end, what he discovered was the fact that the supplier was not paying social insurance for these 5 employees. He was pocketing the money that was being sent over from Germany. Taxes were being paid, but no social insurance. Now, as a consequence, this individual broke his leg on the job and he had no insurance to pay for his medical bills. So he was going around the office with an envelope asking if people would loan him money so he could pay off his medical bills. That is not okay. It simply is not, okay? So if you are a company overseas and you've got staff on the ground in China, you want to make sure that they're protected. Now, look, we've got COVID-19, right? You want your team of people to be insured, both medically, for pension, for whatever. You want them to be safe, okay? Especially if they're high-performing individuals that you don't even want to get rid of, okay? You want to keep them. So if you are going through this methodology of using an intermediary, you should be in control of the system processes. You should know and have a copy of the contracts, the handbooks. You should know exactly what are the payrolls each month. Is the social insurance being paid? Is the tax? That is your responsibility. I'm educating you on what you should know. So you should be going to your service providers to absolutely update yourself, knowing whether this is right, this is happening correctly or not, all right? The second goal, probably, if you're not having a structure on the ground, is that when orders are being generated, so sales orders are being generated, and those clients in China are telling you, we do not want to transact with you in the US, in the UK, in Canada, in Australia, in Germany, in France. We want to transact locally with a Chinese company. Now, if you are a trading entity, then you have the ability to use an import-export agent or an intermediary trading agent, right? Those existed in the past. If you're a service-oriented company, that's probably where it gets a bit tricky. But you should know that there are companies out there that can act as invoicing agents for service transactions. So whether you're doing, you have sales in China for service, or whether you have sales in China for trade, you always have the ability to use intermediary agents to act as invoicing agents predominantly to help you to initiate those sales, okay? Now, obviously, there comes a lot of questions about trust, getting the money out of China, will they pay you, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That all has to be generated under the contracts, and you should be aware of what those contracts are stating, okay? Again, system processes. Check that you have a contract with those intermediaries or with the end clients. Check the invoices. Think about tax optimization. Who is paying the tax? Because before anything can be repatriated outbound, there are tax implications on that transaction in China. Who's going to be responsible and liable for that? Do you have renminbi accounts abroad in order to facilitate those payments easier? What are the payment terms that are in place? These are all things to think about from a system processes aspect, an operational guideline aspect. What are the banking procedures to get the Forex out if they're going to pay you in foreign currency? So many things to think about, all right? So these are, you have to understand that even if you're not incorporating an entity in China, in order to execute your business strategy, you need these system processes in place. Now, ultimately, what you also need is intellectual property protection. Okay, you might not have an entity in China, but you are transacting with China. Intellectual property protection is for everyone that is thinking about doing business in China from that point onwards. It's for trading companies, manufacturing companies, service companies, China representative offices. If you've got a temporary liaison office, a temporary marketing office, if you're an overseas company with no subsidiary in China, but transacting with them, if you're about to market into China, it is for anyone that is thinking about doing business. And I love this. I stole it from Nike. Don't think, just do. Protect your business. First step is trademark. Now, I just want to relate this to something that I'm going to go into the last section of today's presentation about execution. The simplest way, because the biggest question I get when people are thinking about going to China is obviously, how do I get my money out? How do I get my earnings out? It's always really the first question because people are hesitant. The first way, if you have an entity in China, the first and easiest thing you can do is have a trademark licensing agreement. And that is the easiest way to get your money out through a repatriation strategy. All right. But if you don't register your trademark in China, you're already losing one execution mode to get money out, okay? So you've got to really think about this. And I've got a case study that I want to highlight here to you. Now, there was and again, it all comes down to research, knowledge, and vision. I want to highlight here vision, short and long-term vision. I had a German law company, hence the photo, who was using distributors for many years in the Chinese market. And they were very, very content working with this distributor. They signed an exclusivity agreement, which I don't usually recommend, but in this case, that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to sign an exclusive agreement with this one distributor. And knowingly, it was part of the agreement, the distributor registered their trademark in China on their behalf in order to better, and I say this with apostrophes, to better facilitate their sales. Now, you've got to imagine, they weren't thinking about vision. They didn't know how China was going to turn out. So what happened? Well, as the company grew, as sales grew, the company wanted to go independent. They wanted to actually eliminate the distributor so that they wouldn't have to pay those commissions anymore. But then they realized that the guy owned their trademark. And what happened? Well, the distributor lost face because they wanted to cancel the agreement. And they were only willing to sell the trademark to them for an exorbitant amount of money so that they could start their business alone. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of RMB. All right. And they couldn't afford it. That would have taken the whole budget for actually the implementation of their own entity and doing things on their own. So they kept working with the distributor. They were tied to them. All right. They didn't see the vision. They weren't looking at the 10-year plan. What you want to try and do when you're developing your business in China is think short term as well as thinking long term and analyzing how much control do you want to have, or ownership, either control or ownership, do you want to have over your business? So, system process, IP protection should be done at a minimum, okay? First step for everyone, I highlighted that yesterday. So when you don't have an entity in China, right, there are 6 options available to you. And again, here I'm focusing on sales because again, that's a lot of the feedback. If people don't interact with me, I don't really know what information you're looking for. So the people who have interacted with me, I'm getting, you know, in general, they're all looking to sell into China. So I'm giving you here 6 options where without having an entity on the ground in China, you can sell into China. And this is, again, all about execution of your strategy. So the first option is direct sales, right? So e-commerce, it's all about building up your own website, your own mobile app. It's about directly working with platforms, e-commerce platforms in China and how that would work. Or it's also doing direct B2B sales with the customers that are generated from the home office. Now, you have to weigh out the pros and cons. You know, as Ellie highlighted, it's all about cost, localization, and there was a third one that now I forget. You've got to weigh out the pros and cons about all of these options. Direct sales is a great thing to start off with. Does it generate growth for the China business? Not necessarily, okay? Because you're not there to offer customer service representation. You're going to have time zone issues to meet and contact people. A lot of things are still done face-to-face in China. So it can be a very limiting option. The next option is using sales representatives or sales agents who can help you open the doors to the unknown, right? Sales reps and sales agents, they don't hold any liability. They're going to earn commissions. They're not going to purchase the products. That has to be still done direct with the customers, but at least you have people on the ground that are acting on your behalf. Now, if you work with a company that has many, many clients and these sales reps are working on behalf of many, many clients, it's also limiting. Unless you hire a sales rep that is solely responsible for your business and is working basically 24/7 for you, right? So again, pros and cons. You've got to weigh out, you know, all the trade-offs that are associated with this option. The third option is using a professional employment organization, a PEO firm that acts as an intermediary to hire somebody of your choice, either somebody from your office who's going to relocate or someone that you have recruited and found locally that you want to make sure that everything is legal in terms of their employment. So that's ultimately like saying you are hiring your own sales agent that's coming from your head office, who's going to be working 24/7 for you, is employed through an intermediary, but is based on the ground in China and is going to develop all those relationships in China as well. The fourth option is utilizing distributors. Now, the difference between sales agents and distributors is the fact that the distributors will hold more liability, meaning that they will typically purchase your products, warehouse them, ship them, and then sell the product. Ellie highlighted the functions of distributors very, very beautifully in her diagrams on Tuesday's presentation. So that is another option for you. But again, you've got to weigh out the pros and cons. And most importantly, I think with any of these options, you have to think about the exact functions and responsibilities that each party is going to be fulfilling. Okay, so definitely think about that. The fifth option is that you're looking at licensing. So you're going to be going into a licensing relationship with a company in China. They'll license your product, your name, your program, your IP, your design, your technology. You will have typically much less control over your business. But again, it's another option that's available to you, right? This is not all going to fit for everyone. You know, for every single business, you need to evaluate what options would be suitable for you. And the sixth option is franchising, right? You also have the ability to franchise your name, your operations, your marketing. If you're in the restaurant business, your recipes. You know, you have control over the original brand, but the actual functioning and working locally is going to be done by the franchisee. So you've also got to be aware of that. Now, in all of these aspects, what do you need to do? Again, as a second function to the IP, it's all about due diligence procedures on all your partners that you're evaluating. Okay, you should be doing background checks. Now, there are companies out there that do due diligence procedures on your behalf, send you beautiful reports, give you financial backgrounds of companies. They offer you so much information. Now, if you don't have the budget for that, well, I'm here to show you what you can do from your desk, okay? You've got to conduct your due diligence because obviously you've read it all in the media. Scams are popular in China. There are partners that don't want to show transparency, and obviously there are cultural language differences as well. But there are just very simply people out there who are going to scam you, okay? So the first thing that you can do, and you can do this from your desk, it's just a matter of emailing your contact or WeChatting with them and saying, look, you know, before I proceed with you, I've got to tell my bosses that you are legitimate. Can I see your company's business license? Can I see the tax certificates? If you own IP, can I see those IP registrations? Can I see, you know, if you're going to collaborate with a factory, can I see the lease agreement and the land use right of the certificate? That allows you to know that the factory actually exists even before you visit the factory. Can I look at your financial documents? Now, for some of these, they might say, no, I'm not going to provide them. What harm is there in just asking to see what they're going to provide you? If they refuse to provide you even just the business license, which does not really have so much confidential information, because you could ultimately go to the MOFCOM or COC office and apply to get it. You can also go online to see what the content is in the business license. It doesn't hurt anything to ask. Just ask these partners, okay? Can I see your business license? That's step number one. You want to know that they're legitimate. You want to know who you're going to be transacting with, okay? The next step is, again, all of this you can do through your own desk, is all about do your own due diligence. So conduct general online search using both English and Chinese search engines. A Chinese search engine would be, for example, Bing. You can type in the Chinese, you can just copy and paste the Chinese name that they've given you or the company and see what pops up. Use English websites. Call the general fixed phone line several times to know whether people are picking up in the name of the company or not. Check if your contacts are actually working there. Are they really authorized representatives of that company? Try to talk to third parties, which means asking those potential partners, you know, could we get a reference from one of your customers? Could we get a reference from one of your suppliers? I get a lot of clients asking me for references. Why shouldn't you do that with partners in China? It's such a Western thing to do. Of course you can do it in China. You just simply have to ask. If you don't get feedback, that should be a feeling in your stomach that something is not right. Okay? Ask for foreign references. Check the address. Check the address by maybe hiring somebody to go out to the location and see if it's valid. Or if you're flying over, which obviously now nobody is, you can go visit yourself. Obtain an AIC file, which you can do through a lawyer or an agent to know what is the content in their business license. Check the official company CHOP and business license. Ask the question, if we were to transact with you, could you give us your bank account details? And then check, is the bank account name in the name of the company or in an individual's name? And then obviously check for the financial report. Now these are things that maybe they won't give to you. I would never give my financial reports or statuses to people. But if you utilize a company to do a formal background check, those can be obtained through those types of companies where you can get the financial background of the company. Signs of suspicion, very simply, it's all too good to be true. I mean, if it's such smooth process, I would be wondering myself. If the website is only in English, I generally find that odd. Having said that though, Woodburn's website is only in English, but primarily because 100% of our clients are from overseas. But if you're working with a partner in China who's saying that he's going to do business in China and work with clients in China, generally they would have Chinese websites. If they're pushing you all the time and giving you certain timelines and deadlines, you know, the Chinese, they love to play on the patience of Westerners. You should be creating your own timeline and knowing when to start something and when not. If there's no verifiable track record, if there's no company email address, if just simply the information doesn't add up and your gut is telling you something's not right, if there are no production facilities, no licenses, no staff, if they're offering products for considerably cheaper than what's market average, that's a big exclamation mark. If your contact ultimately doesn't work for the company, then who is he? What is the communication style if your contact person is consistently changing? Are they requiring facilitation fees or full upfront fees? That's something that you might want to, or you know, you might want to believe that it's a sign of suspicion. So phase one, no structure on the ground. What should I consider if I want to move on the ground? Okay, so we've talked all about the execution strategy. How to execute your strategy if you're not going to have a structure on the ground, right? It's all about looking at your goals. Do you want to have someone on the ground, invoicing, IP protection, partner due diligences, looking at the various sales options that are available to you and understanding what fits you, what fits your business model, maybe thinking in phases, phase one, phase two, phase three for that without on the ground structure. But, you know, now we've got to think about how would you execute your strategy if you suddenly wanted to move from that phase one of no structure on the ground to something that's on the ground. So I've listed here some trigger points. So these are usually questions that I ask my clients at the point where they're telling me, no, we really need something on the ground, okay? So the questions I ask are, what volume of business have you achieved? What value of business have you achieved? Are you being asked to issue FAPIAOs in your own company name because the client doesn't like to work with the intermediary? Are you being asked for local representation, and are you in need of a team of people that are being guided by a country manager? Are you being asked to stock inventory on the ground? Do you need to increase your brand image by having a representation on the ground? Do you need your own office space? For example, are you required to have a showroom locally where you can display products? Do you need to have your own warehousing facility because you want to do your own pick, pack, labeling, or you want to do very simple assembly? Do you need to start marketing locally and supervise those marketing initiatives that are occurring locally, etc.? I mean, I've just given 8 examples here of questions that I asked. Now, with a lot of these things, you know, for example, stocking inventory, you can still use an outsourced provider for that. It depends on what your plan is and what your vision is. But these are questions that should pique your interest to know how to amend your strategy and move forward with the growth of your business. Okay. Now, obviously, I'm not going to go into detail here about how to set up a business in China, because that's really a whole nother webinar and presentation. But I just wanted to highlight here advantages of incorporating a structure in China that you shouldn't under-evaluate, okay? Image is a very big thing for individuals as well as other companies in China. If you have an entity in China, it just shows extreme commitment to the market. It means you are there to stay. Don't under-evaluate that. It increases your brand image and your profile because you are there. You have the ability to also hire people in your own company name. Now, what I'm trying to say with that comment is, think about someone you're going to employ in China. How would it make them feel if you constantly, for 5 years, used an intermediary to hire them, and there was no vision to actually incorporate in China at all? Do you think the individual would feel stable in your organization? Do you think it would show signs of growth? Not really. And that might lead to very high turnover for you. It obviously gives you the ability to invoice, issue local fapiaos to customers. It gives you a bit of financial freedom. It allows you to separate your financial projections into an entity versus doing it, through your head office. Provides you structure that is yours to manage. And what I mean by this is very simply, you will have ultimate control and power about the direction your business is going in and the expansion. It allows you to apply for specific licenses yourself. And it gives you the ability to own marketing platforms and control them as well. How to execute? So that's all about, thinking about executing with something on the ground. Again, on the YouTube channel, there are plenty of videos up there about in-depth business models like distribution models, e-commerce models. I've also have a webinar very simply on setting up a business in China. I have webinars on foreign investment law. There's a lot of content and education. I can't fit that all into one presentation, unfortunately. So I'm going with the next best thing, which is something that most people are looking for in the phase 1 of their entry into China, which is marketing. And in fact, I have to say, most people don't even think about marketing. They're first thinking about sales without thinking about their brand image, their brand awareness, and having people get to know them. So I wanted to talk about how you could execute your marketing strategy in China and what you need to think about from a protection perspective, system processes perspective. So, the first question obviously arises, how effective is it to develop a Chinese marketing strategy from your home jurisdiction versus in China? Quite frankly, there is no real pro and con, because ultimately it totally comes down to what is your vision? What is your budget? What is your business plan? So I have clients that will do their marketing from their home office, meaning that they've hired people within their organization to do it for them. They're Chinese individuals speaking Chinese. I've had clients who've outsourced the marketing to a China marketing agent, digital marketing agency, for example, who will facilitate all of the marketing. And then the next phase is, and usually those Chinese marketing digital agencies, they have offices essentially in your home jurisdiction as well as in China, obviously. And then you will have those that want to do it in-house so that they have more control, and that then they will do that work in-house in China under their own entity. Now, I have a very simple conclusion for people. It's very, very simple. And this is about execution for anything that you do. Here I'm relating it to marketing, but you can look at it from all different perspectives. Should you do it from home or do it from China? My philosophy is, if you want to generate revenue in China and you want to trade locally under a commercial or industrial license, then you need to think about incorporating something in China. It just means you're committed You're going to take full control. If there is no need to generate revenue in China initially, or there is no need to generate revenue because it can be generated in the home office, then you can do everything from home and utilize outsourced providers that can help you initiate everything from a marketing perspective. It means, however, that you have to give control to third parties or individuals. Okay? So let's start with the first marketing tool. But as I highlighted in yesterday's presentation, this is also the first tool for you to build your ecosystem in China. And it is all about WeChat, right? As an individual, you can have a WeChat account. As I mentioned, if you want to connect with me, more than happy to be connected with you. I'm going to give you right now my WeChat ID. Very simple. And you can connect with me. Absolutely no problems there. Love to build on my ecosystem. Now, you've got to imagine in China, I love this because I took this from a app website in the UK, and I thought it was an amazing comparison. So if you look at your mobile phones right now, and this example is with the UK. So if you're from the UK, look at your mobile phone and look at all the apps you have downloaded. All right? I mean, there are probably a good 50, 60 different apps that are on your phone. In China, you can survive with just one app, WeChat, and it encompasses everything that you see that you've downloaded from the UK. Okay, it can do the majority of those functions. All right, so that is how important WeChat is in China. WeChat is your new business card to do everything in China. Now, when you want to set up a WeChat company account, there are 3 different ways to do that. One is via your overseas company, one is through a third party, or one is to do it directly from your own Chinese company. Okay, I'm not going to go into detail today about how that all works because I've done a presentation on that already in January where you can take a look at all those details. But those are your 3 options that you have available to you. And as Ellie said, you've got to weigh off the trade-offs associated with each of those 3 to know what fits you best. But WeChat company page is probably really critical if you want to promote your brand and do marketing in China and get your brand name out there. Domain names, .cn domain names. Requirements for registering a Chinese domain name is really, really easy. It is all headed out by the Ministry of Information and Industry, so the MII. And it is controlled ultimately by the China Internet Network Information Center. But you can register a .cn today. I've shown it here. I took this from my last presentation in January. You can go to godaddy.com/zh or just type in GoDaddy China and you can protect your domain. Do you need a domain? That's ultimately the biggest question you should be asking yourselves. But you could do that today. Just like your trademark registration you could do today, you can do your domain name registration as well yourself today. Okay? Save your brand, register your trademark and register your Chinese domain name as long as it fits your strategy. Okay? So it's important to note that similar to trademark registrations, it's always a first to file principle. So the first one who gets it, and then you have to think about buying it if you don't own it and you want it, right? So register your trade name, try it out today to see if it works. You might want to purchase several if you're thinking about several types of businesses or several types of product lines that have different brand names associated with to get into the market. You might want to just register all that. It's so inexpensive, right? I mean, it's really, I mean, unless you're buying it from another individual, it's really not expensive. If someone's taken it, think about legal action if they've done it in bad faith, similar to the trademarks. But just remember, preemption by registration is your best and least expensive form of protection. Register today. So think about that for the .cn. Now, why am I leading on to this? Because another tool that you might need is to have a website that is hosted in China. So I've given the example here of Burberry. I've got a lot of UK people that are interacting with me, and Burberry was the first name that popped in my head. I just took this a couple of days ago, or yesterday, as you can see. And they have cn.burberry.com. If you look on the top left-hand corner, highlighted in yellow, that is their domain name, which they've registered. It's a complete Chinese website, and it's hosted in China. There are different advantages and disadvantages of hosting, whether you're hosting your site outside of China or inside China. You've got to imagine that the best option is obviously hosting it inside China. Potentially, primarily because of the slowness when it's hosted outside, as well as the dormancy. And then most importantly, the firewall. All right. Now, hosting in China is obviously, we all know it's the best route, but we have to understand that if we want to have a website hosted in China, there's certain licensing requirements, which means you need to apply for an ICP license, or you need to do an ICP filing depending on what you are doing with that site. So if you are actually trading on that site, meaning that people can actually purchase products from your site, then you need an ICP license. If people are just simply using the website as a showroom, meaning they can't purchase anything, it's just literally a showroom, then they have to do an ICP filing. Okay? How do you do those filings? How do you do those applications? Only a Chinese entity can do those applications. So before I get on to the next chapter, I want to provide you with two case studies. So the first case study is of a UK brand, and I actually love their strategy for the Chinese market because they really have done it in phases, and they've had also triggers. So this is a UK brand, 3 generations, I think 3 generations. They produce in the UK and they export and sell into the Chinese market. It's a leather accessories brand. Now, what did they do? So when they decided that in China was interesting for them, they were actually approached by a Western distributor. So it was a Westerner based in Tianjin, had his own trading company. He had a lot of other brands that he was working with, and he approached them. He thought it was a very interesting brand to bring into the market. And so they formulated a great relationship. Now, obviously, this was easy because it was a Westerner on the ground in China, having his own company, same mentality, same mindset. Communication was fluid and fluent. And it was just an easy setup. So this distributor on their behalf had opened a retail shop, so offline, and over the years had actually opened shops on 3 different e-commerce platforms. And I'm guessing that they worked together for a good 7-8 years with no issues. And as it grew, the distributor even hired individuals to solely work for that brand. The distributor recruited them, hired them, and became then the interaction points with the client in the UK. Now, all of a sudden came the trigger point. The Western distributor decided to go into retirement, and he was closing down his company, and he was terminating the agreements with all of his clients, but in a very kind and gentle way, saying, take your time. You've got about 18 months to know what direction you want to go into. So the client that I worked with had a decision to make. Do I find another distributor, or do I set up on my own? And if I set up on my own, then ideally I would love to take those staff members that are already working on my brand and bring them over to me. Lo and behold, that is what he did. Okay, he went ahead and he incorporated his own company in Tianjin, which was not the best of places for him, but he didn't want to lose the staff. It was too critical for him to keep and maintain the staff. So he set up in Tianjin. He opened his own retail store. He chose another mall, which he thought was better, and he did his own research to find the right location for it. And he then also converted all the e-commerce contracts that were with the old distributor to his new entity. And he kept the business running. And this was all done in phases. So phase one was ultimately doing something without an operation on the ground, with a distributor that held certain liabilities because they purchased the goods, they warehoused it. And now he's in a situation of full and utter control over his Chinese organization. And I think one of the biggest comments or discoveries that's come out for him is how so much more transparent the figures are for him in understanding costs, understanding revenues, and understanding expenses. And he now has a much clearer idea on how to grow the business and what more to do. So that's a great success story. The second story that case study I want to provide with you is of a US e-commerce platform that decided to go into the Chinese market. And how they went into the Chinese market was that they utilized a cousin of an employee that was based in the headquarters to purchase the domain and to also obtain the ICP license. So this cousin had his own company. The cousin with this company obtained the ICP license for that website. As the years progressed, the site became extremely successful in China, extremely successful. And they wanted to have or develop a IT back office in China to control all the IT implications associated with the site and improve on it, but also to have a supply chain entity, a supply chain back office to facilitate all the logistics and warehousing and all of that fun stuff. And initially when they set up these back offices, quite frankly, they were not so concerned by bringing back in the control over the ICP license and the domain name. It didn't really bother them. They were anyway paying a monthly fee to the cousin to control it. But obviously at some point they wanted it. And then came the uncomfortable discussion and negotiation with the cousin because they just dragged it out. And they had to pay off quite a large one-off fee in order to then obtain control over it. So a lot of costs there. What I want to say with all of this is that everyone has a different pathway to China. Everyone has a different strategy. And most of the time people develop it in phases, phase 1 and phase 2, potentially even phase 3 and phase 4. But you have to remember all of the different obstacles that are already in your path and think logically at what point do you want to attack them. Think also about your trigger points. What are your trigger points? Case 1, it was very simply the distributor went into retirement. In case study 2, it was very simple that they realized they needed an on-the-ground team to handle all of the IT, back-end IT and supply chain issues. So, you've got to think about all of these things that might pop up along the way. I hope those case studies were useful to you in kind of visualizing what I'm trying to explain about execution. How to execute your e-commerce strategy. I've only got 2 slides on this because again, I think we're running out of time. But, and Ellie actually did touch on this with a slide of hers. But I just want to highlight here because Ellie didn't really explain what types of e-commerce platforms are there. And I want to explain it in a little bit more detail so people have a bit of an understanding. You have online malls like Tmall. You have hypermarkets. You've got specialty marketplaces, and you got flash sale websites. This is just touching, literally touching the most common ones that are out there, okay? There are, I can't even tell you, I don't even know the number of how many platforms exist. What I want to highlight here today is that Tmall might not be the platform for you. I know it's the one that everyone knows globally, but it just might not be the one for you. I've been talking lately with quite a few baby product, mother care, child-oriented companies. You might want to go into the specialty marketplace. If you see item number 2 down there, it's called baybay.com. You might want to just focus on that because that is directly going to people interested in products for children or mothers. Okay? Think about your product and analyze and research what would be the right fit for you for an e-commerce platform. Think about funding, and I say funding because if you look at a comparison of these different platforms and you look at entry cost, it's the column on the left, entry cost or commission fee. It is not cheap to get on some of these platforms. So then you've got to really know, is it the right platform for you? All right, think about market development plans for these e-commerce platforms. Think about the regulations and the operations associated with these e-commerce platforms. There's a new e-commerce, I don't want to say new because it's not really new. 1st of January 2019, there were additional e-commerce regulations that popped out. You should know what are your rights and obligations by going on any of these e-commerce platforms. You've got to educate yourself on that. It is critical. Just some strategies for those of you that are overseas retailers and you want to go into the e-commerce realm. Think about supply chain structure. Think about the operational processes. This is all about the system processes that are in the roadmap. Think about tax efficiency. You've got to carefully design this. You've got to do your due diligence on your Chinese business partners who are helping you to develop that e-commerce strategy. You might want to check on background, do a due diligence on the platforms. You might want to do a due diligence on the supply chain, so the logistics providers, the warehousings. You've got to understand what are your rights and obligations doing e-commerce in China as well. You've got to make sure you got contracts in place. Okay, please. I mean, yes, it's China. It used to not be so pedantic about written agreement. We are pedantic now about written agreements. Please get contracts in place, just like you would in the Western world. Get contracts in place, understand what are the terms and regulations for everyone that is involved with these transactions. And then most importantly, which people really don't do, is develop an internal compliance program. Again, system processes. Closely monitor, control all of the compliance aspects. Who is the responsible party for anything? Most of these sites, which I'm so happy about now, will force you to have a trademark license. So if you want to do e-commerce, you got to register your trademark anyhow. They won't work with you otherwise. Now, I'm going to end today's presentation to kind of make it full circle because it's a very vague topic when I say how to execute in China. I tend to be usually very specific about it, but I wanted to give you guys an overall view. So how to execute outbound payments, because as I mentioned earlier, this is generally the first question that pops up. How am I going to get my money out of China, right? So I want to look at both internal and external transfers. Internal transfers means between sister companies, meaning the head office and the subsidiary in China. And external transfers are related to companies that are transacting in China and knowing how to get the money out. And I want you all within this chapter to understand what it takes to get money out of China. It just very simply is not easy, okay? And it's very bureaucratic. So let's look at that. Now, for external transfers, meaning overseas company and Chinese client, why is understanding the process important for you? Well, one thing, it helps you understand what it takes for your Chinese client to get money to you overseas. It is possible. It's not that you won't ever get paid, but it is really not easy. It will help you to communicate with your Chinese counterpart versus getting frustrated and potentially making the relationship sour, okay? And most importantly, it's about fraud. I don't want these Chinese counterparts to cheat you, which many of them try to do, especially when it comes to the tax component. So that's why I'm doing this. It's to again, it's all about education. So when you're doing a transfer of service fees outbound by the Chinese companies to you in the UK, in the US, in Canada, in Australia, wherever you might be in the world, first thing you need is a valid and true business reason for implementing the service fee. So you definitely need a service agreement between you and the Chinese client. Whether that's, I don't know what service you're offering them, but it might be a technical agreement, recruitment, specific service related, marketing, whatever it might be. Okay? When you're creating this agreement, it has to be in Chinese and English. English is for your benefit. It needs to be in Chinese because the contract will be submitted to the tax bureau in China for approval, and they won't accept an English version. The service fee should be implemented thinking about transfer pricing models, and you should be aware of permanent establishment guidelines for your home jurisdiction, okay? You've got to think about tax considerations as well. So think about, again, the permanent establishment aspect. Are you triggering it? Is there going to be VAT applicable? Okay. Depending on where the service is actually being delivered, VAT may or may not be exempted. On all service invoices, there is going to be, if the client in China is a general VAT taxpayer, there will be a 6.8% VAT and surtax applicable on that invoice. In addition, there will be a withholding tax rate that will also be applicable. And if you've got a DTA with China, generally it's at 10%. Most of the time, it's between 5 and 10%. So that will be applicable as well. Now, the biggest question is who pays that tax? Who is liable? Is it you overseas, or is it you in China, the Chinese entity, the Chinese client? Okay, that is a negotiation point of view. If it needs to be paid because the service is being generated on the ground in China, then it's a question of who's liable for it, okay, and who should be paying for it. So it's the 68.8% VAT, and it's also the withholding tax. Now, oh, sorry, and I just want to emphasize here, it should be transparent in the contract who was paying for it. You don't want to have an argument later on about it, okay? It should be written in the contract. So next, you're looking at the outbound payment process. The first thing that has to happen is that the contract registration has to occur with the tax bureau in charge, and that's the tax bureau of the Chinese company. The Chinese company, if they want to apply for DTA benefits to get a lower withholding tax rate, they have to do that. They will probably also have to file for a profits tax return. And if the amount is over 50,000 renminbi, they can just do a record filing with the tax. Sorry, if it's under 50, I made a mistake there. If it's under 50,000 RMB, they can just do a record filing with the tax bureau versus going to the State Administration of Foreign Exchange. And then once all of that is done with the tax bureau and you have the consent to go, then you can go and make the bank payment. Now, every single bank will have a different documentation list, but generally speaking, you will have to provide the service contract that has been approved by the tax bureau. You will also have to provide the invoice and the payment notice, and then you will have to provide other documents for authenticity. The bank will give you a timeline based on their Forex balance when they are able to repatriate the funds to you in the UK, US, Canada, wherever it might be. Which is why one of your considerations should be to see whether you can open a renminbi account in your home jurisdiction, for example, with Bank of China or ICBC or whomever, to facilitate and make easier these transfers, because China does have a lack of Forex. We have had companies where it's taken 6 months, if not longer, to do one simple overseas repatriation. Okay, obviously it's because the sums were higher You had to add the state administration of foreign exchange amounts there as well. But I want this, so, you know, this transfer is applicable to all those of you that want to transact in China, but don't want to have an entity in China. Now, we're going to look at internal transfers. So overseas companies and their Chinese subsidiary. Why is it important to develop strategies, right? Well, the first thing, because it aids in repatriating funds out of China. You want to free up your capital. You might not want to keep all of your capital on the ground. Some of you might want to, others may not feel comfortable doing that. It aids in developing true and authentic agreements and contracts to create a very tax optimized structure for your organization, okay? It also aids in giving you a choice. Nobody is forcing you to take your money out of China. It is you who is making that decision. It's your comfort level, okay, in terms of taking it out. But to develop strategies is critical, and it should be done within the first year of your startup phase in China, okay? Now, these are all questions that I get from clients about common concerns. And the first one is obviously, can I take my money out? Will there be at any point China who comes and says you're not allowed to take your money out? No, China, you know, they're trying to be a Western standard country. They want to keep business booming. They're not going to prevent this from happening, but they do have just their own operational issues on the ground that you have to be aware of. There is a lot of documentation. And obviously one of the things that I can't emphasize more is just don't fake these agreements. Now, 5 years or more ago, you could totally fake it. Nobody was checking anything. Now you can't. All the agreements or strategies you want to set up have to be true, authentic, real, okay? Now, the biggest question I ask people, because they're not aware of this, is are the authorities in China familiar with tax optimized structures? And the answer very simply is yes. So if you're looking at having a shareholding company in British Virgin Islands, Isle of Man, Guernsey, Seychelles, well, that's a big sign that, you know, you're using a tax haven. Chinese authorities don't like that. They'll make problems for you a little bit more difficult. You want to make sure that your overseas company that is you're repatriating funds to is has an economic and commercial substance, that it is not a pure holding company. Otherwise, you will not benefit from the withholding taxes, or sorry, from the double taxation agreements and the terms and conditions that are outlined in there. You want to be smart. I always say there are two bureaus in China you don't want to mess around with. The first one is the tax bureau, and the second one is the labor bureau. You do not want to mess with those two bureaus. They can halt your business absolutely, I mean, immediately. All right. Here are some methods of repatriation. Again, I've made a presentation about this. I've done a whole webinar, 60-minute one just on this. But just to outline a little bit, these are all the different types of repatriations that you could create if you wanted to, okay? So when you're reflecting back on your roadmap, all right, there is 0 point in thinking of creating repatriation strategies if you cannot read the numbers or analyze them within your organization, okay? No point, 0 point. Don't spend money on a lawyer or a service provider to create those for you if you cannot analyze, or sorry, if you cannot, and if you are not asking questions about your numbers and analyzing them, okay? You need to always be able to know what decisions to make in terms of repatriation, and you've got to be able to make those decisions immediately. I had a client who was in his startup phase, and he approached me because this was amazing. He surprisingly won a bid for a project in China. They had their own entity in China. They won a bid, and by the end of the year, they were going to earn in phases close to $1 million US by fulfilling the project. And he had a small team, didn't need more people. He certainly didn't need those funds in China. And he was already too late in creating these repatriation strategies because his trademark wasn't registered. So that wasn't like an easy go-to to get licensing. There was no marketing agreement. All of these agreements would have been post-dated the bid. So it would have been very suspicious for the tax bureau. People do get very successful in China very quickly, and you need to be prepared for that. So follow the roadmap, okay? Make sure you're following that as a guideline. So what are your next steps? Create your roadmap. Understand what you need to do for each milestone. Understand what you have to do from, obtaining that superpower, those 9 superpowers, so that you're doing things right along the way. All right. Now, how can we help you? It's the same slide as yesterday's if you joined. Basically, we've got the Woodburn Mentorship Program. We provide honest and ethical advisory. We help to validate business plans and budgets, and we also help in terms of implementation and growth strategies. And all of this basically means that we can help you to execute your strategies in China. So if you want to book a session with me and you just want to have a chat, I know people are a bit lonely at home. So if you want to just chat and brainstorm about your strategies, or you want to get more information about Woodburn, or you just, want to talk about China and the current situation, you can book a strategy session with me. I've added the link into the GoToWebinar. These strategy sessions are free of charge, guys. Don't feel intimidated by reaching out to me. I've had a couple of feedbacks on that. It's just a brainstorming session. It's allowing me to get to know you, you getting to know me, understanding what I can offer as a service to you, and giving you some advice on your current status, what you need to think about. These first sessions, it's free. It's just a chat. Don't feel overwhelmed by talking to me or feeling intimidated or shy. Just reach out. I'm happy to talk with all of you. Listen, we've run out of time again. I really do apologize for that. I didn't mean to run over. There's a bunch of questions that come in. John, yours is extremely long to read out, but I will be getting back to you on that. Helen, you came out with one which is really good about trademarks. I'm just gonna, I just want to talk to a couple of you. So just wondering what's the best way to start the trademark registration? Is there an official direct site rather than agents, scammer who will just charge a premium for the same service and outcome? So Helen, when you go to Google, or you might have a better result on Bing, type in CTMO or China Trademark Office, and you could do your first initial search. That could be your first step. The online search function is not necessarily perfection, because a lot of registrations are still done manually. So for example, I did have a client in the past, they registered their trademark very late in the game. And you honestly won't believe this. We didn't when we found out, but come 6 months into the registration, it was discovered that a hijacker had actually registered the trademark 2 weeks, literally 13 days prior to their filing date, to obtain their trademark. So the search function online is very difficult. What we offer, again, as well as a bunch of different other providers, we do a manual search directly with the CTMO to see what the outcome is. Now, when you do a trademark search, you will not get a definitive yes or no answer. Yes, I should register, or no, or there's availability, or no, I have no option. What we do, and what most other IP providers do, is they give you a ratio of success for your trademark. And that's based on the classes and subclasses that you're registering in. And then it's up to you to decide, based on that ratio, do we go ahead and will we achieve failure, or will we achieve success? Unfortunately, in China, it's a very lengthy procedure to register your trademark. The minimum I've experienced lately is 12 months. The most has been about 14 months. So be aware of that. That's why you should be really registering right now. Helen, I hope I was able to answer you on the trademark. For domain names, literally you go to the website, you put the name in, and you say you want to buy it. You do that today. You do that now. Okay. Okay, John, you've written me a lot of info. I'm going to get back to you directly. But Helen, I hope I was able to answer your question. we're going to leave it there for today. Again, if you want to book a strategy session with me, 30 minutes, 1 hour, you can very easily do that. Don't forget, we're also, Ellie and I, going to be doing a live online workshop. Currently, the date is set at May 6th. I've gotten some feedback yesterday that people would appreciate it if we could do it earlier, but it would be a full day workshop from about 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. In relation to building a strategy for China, helping you do it, getting you on the right roadmap, or helping you build the right roadmap, giving you tips on what you should be thinking about, raising questions, brainstorming with you, doing a couple of worksheets and handouts to get things down on paper. And our goal would ultimately be that you leave that online workshop with basically a bullet point checklist of what you should be considering, what should be your next steps to formulate an appropriate business plan and budget for China. So if you're interested in that, please email me at christina@woodburnglobal.com. It's going to be much cheaper than the live session was going to be at. And obviously, because it's online, we can't do it in London. Because it's online, we can take people from anywhere in the world. So just see if you would be interested and message me. And then we have upcoming webinars. So I'm creating all of these upcoming webinars. I haven't put them on the website yet. I'm going to be doing one on China market entry, one on pre-investments information, one about accounting and tax. It should be all coming up within the months of April and May, because I'm seeing that the result of these webinars has been phenomenal in terms of live attendees. So I'm seeing that people have definitely more time to join. So if there is something that interests you, or you have suggestions on topics that you would like me to touch on and do again, or if you see things that are on the YouTube channel that maybe you want to have a refresher on, please email me. I'm completely open to suggestions. You can email me at christina@woodburnglobal.com. Just give me some advice on topics you would like to have covered, and I can draw up a webinar series that's around that, whether it's just one single webinar or whether it will be a series of webinars, depending on how big the topic actually is. So what do you want to be educated on, people? Tell me, what do you want to know? What would you like to be educated on in relation to China and your business? Be interactive with me. You can even, if you have ideas right now, add them into the questions section of the control panel, and I'll see what I can come up with. I really, for those of you that joined the whole 4 days, amazing. Thank you so much for coming all the 4 days. It's been a pleasure having you online, and for those of you that have been interacting with me. For those that missed out on some of the webinars, they are already up on the YouTube channel, so you can actually listen into them. And I hope to see all of you again in the upcoming webinars, which will probably be coming up in the first couple of weeks of April, second couple of weeks, the last weeks of April, and early May as well, since we're all kind of stuck at home. So again, just interact, let me know, set up meetings with me, connect with me on WeChat, and I'd be happy to talk more. All right, I'll let you guys go, and I'll get back to those again that asked questions. Thank you all for joining. Have a great afternoon and day. Bye.